Nindak nehre rakhi angan kuti chabai. Always keep your critic close by and keep him well. What the hell? I'm an Indian and I love this country. I'm going to be here. I have no need of going anywhere else. You can't survive in a jail without friendships. And those friendships are made with the most unlikely people because you're thrown together with people you never knew. Even in that jail, I was still a very privileged person. And there's a lot I need to do before I level that playing field.
Our guest today is nothing short of remarkable. With a degree from IIT Kanpur and a US passport, she could have led a life that many dream of. Instead, she chose to surrender her American citizenship and dedicate her life to fighting the battles of exploited laborers in Chhattisgarh. Her activism led to her arrest in 2018 in the Bhima Koregaon violence case, and she went on to spend 3 years in jail in Pune and then in Mumbai. She is currently out on bail and cannot comment on the case as an under trial, but she is here to discuss her newly released book with us titled From Phansi Yard, which is a riveting portrayal of fellow inmates and observations made through the bars of her cell in Yehrewada prison. Very privileged to have with us lawyer, activist and trade unionist Sudha Bharadwaj on Buzz by the Bay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Really grateful to have you in the studio with us. And I know, you're out on bail and according to your bail terms, you're not allowed to leave Mumbai.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
So what have you been doing the last couple of years? It's been almost 2 years now?
That's right. I came out in December 2021. Yes, it's nearly 2 years now.
Okay.
Well, for the first few months, I was busy getting my sureties, and at that time, I didn't have work, I didn't have a place to stay, so I was working all that out. But now I am supported by some trade unions. I do labor cases. I also work alongside a senior advocate in the High Court. And so I live in a friend has been kind enough to allow me to stay in her house. So I got settled. I've become a Mumbaiker. I'm traveling up and down by local train.
You've become a Mumbaiker. You've been forced to become a Mumbaiker, but...
That's right.
Right. And of course, you have many fans and admirers. So of course, you have the support. That's great. And you've been busy publishing this book.
Yes, actually, well, I didn't write most of it when I came out. This was all written in Yehrewada in the first half of my incarceration when we were in the Yehrewada jail. And that's why it's called From Phansi Yard, because we were lodged in Phansi Yard at that time. So when I came out, I just had those notes and I typed them out. And some friends thought it was maybe worthy of publication. That was not in my mind when I wrote those notes. But it's out as a book. I'm as surprised myself.
I've been reading it. It's really riveting. Quite scary in parts, I must admit. So that's good. You have been working on labor cases.
That's right.
Okay. So firstly, starting with the book. Why is it titled From Phansi Yard?
Well, as I said in the first half of our incarceration, for some reason we were kept in the Phansi Yard. It's not very clear why, because later on when we went to Baikala, we were in the barrack. So maybe it was just a jail. It was the decision of the jail administration. So, the Phansi Yard there, the death row there, it consists of 5 cells. So there were 2 sisters who were on death row, and then there was myself and Professor Shoma Sen. We are co-accused in our case. And then there was another cell, which basically the constables used to use like a storeroom and bathroom, washroom, etc. So, and there was there were these cells abutting on a corridor, and all that is sort of inside a cage. And it was through, we were sitting in the corridor and watching people in the ground. It overlooks the ground. Or from the back of our cell, we could see the factory where people would come to work. And for me, I am a person who, from a very young age, got involved in the trade union movement at the age of 25. So I'm so used to being with people, and that, this experience of sort of solitarily being in a cell was very unnerving for me. So this was my way of actually reaching out to these women I saw. Because I'd keep watching and something would catch my eye. And then later on, maybe when we are, filling water or going for mulaqat, or we are sitting in the, van going to the court, or going to the canteen, then I would get time to talk to these women. For many of these women, they're abandoned, they're illiterate.
Yes.
They don't understand the legal system. So how do they cope?
Yeah, absolutely.
So my book is basically about how they cope.
Because there's so much actually I want to ask you after reading your book, but being kept in, death row in that yard, that's very intimidating.
No, it was. And particularly, I don't know how either of us, myself or Professor Sen, would have done without each other, because the other two women who were there, that was their 24th year there. So they had become extremely bitter. They were really not very stable emotionally. Then sometimes they would curse and cry and hurl abuses, and so it was really scary. I remember one day when I was humming a song, I was shouted at by, "Don't hum songs here." So I couldn't snore. I was told I'm snoring.
Oh God!
So we were really terrified of them. It was a difficult thing, and I think that's why I took to writing. Writing, reading. That was the only way one could survive.
No, you're talking about this and smiling and laughing, and that in itself is very remarkable. And you've written in your book that it helped me understand where I was and didn't leave any scope for self-pity. It's so easy to have a lot of self-pity in a situation like that, right? So I've been reading newspaper reports of late about, repression against anti-displacement organizations and activists. And of course, it was, you have been an activist for a long time. But do you feel in this environment being an activist is not easy?
Yes, because unfortunately, activism is being portrayed very negatively, which is not the case. पता नहीं आपने कबीर का दोहा सुना होगा, निंदक नेहरे राखी आंगन कुटी छबाए. Always keep your critic close by and keep him well. So her also well. So but now, for example, when the farmers came, they had a critique of the laws. You could have talked to them. But the whole thing escalated in a situation where they're being barricaded, and their electricity is being cut and nails are put on the road and they're being vilified, and it just required listening to them. And eventually the laws were rolled back because it was clear that the farming community was not. So there's a lot you can gain from listening to people. See, there's a lot in the Constitution.
Yes.
We have, apart from fundamental rights to organize and protest peacefully and so on, and freedom of thought and expression and association, we in the directive principles have a lot of things. We have that there shouldn't be concentration of wealth, that resources should be used for the common good, that there should be certain minimum standards of health and safety. How are they going to come to fruition if you don't listen to people who are working among those communities? Yes. To take that as an oppositional thing, as something negative, as something anti-national even, I find it very
and you
sad.
chose to advocate their cause, right? And as I said in my introduction, you've been working in this area since the 80s, from what I read in your book, from the time of the first Asian Games. Yeah. And then you went on to live in labor camps in Bhilai. You grew up in campuses like in Cambridge and places like that. You have US passport. And then you went on to, living in Chhatisgarh in very basic conditions. What compelling circumstances made you decide you wanted to surrender your US citizenship? What made you go to Chhatisgarh? What were those principles that made you go there?
I don't know. I can't. I think my mother was definitely a very important role model for me. She was a socialist. She was a very brilliant economist. She was always concerned about people and about the poor. And I think that was something one imbibed. And then once my childhood was there in the JNU campus, and again there we saw a lot of students being very concerned about issues. And when I sort of came of age, as it were, around 1984, and two very important events shook the nation. One was the anti-Sikh I would call it even genocide. I mean, it was an anti-Sikh genocide. And the other was the Bhopal gas tragedy. And I think these two, I mean, most of the activists of my generation have somehow or the other been affected by these incidents. And to say that, look, something is going very wrong. Initially, my involvement with the working class movement, and then after that, once I came to meet Niyogi, I mean, that was a transformation, because he was not just a trade unionist. He was a trade unionist with a remarkable vision. So it was not, workers just struggling for economic demands. They were struggling against alcoholism. They were setting up their own schools, their own hospitals. They had a dream of a new Chhattisgarh, a democratic Chhattisgarh. And that was something which was really inspiring. And then I just threw my lot in. And, everybody asked me, I mean, it must have been difficult. I don't see it as a sacrifice. It was like going and sitting in the lap of people. It was such a warm feeling. Materially, it might have been a little difficult. After that, I mean, the question of citizenship and all became very small, because it didn't make any sense. I mean, why do I need an American citizenship? So, what the hell? I'm an Indian, and I love this country. I'm going to be here. I have no need of going anywhere else.
That's amazing that you don't even see it as a sacrifice, when many would see it as a supreme sacrifice. You don't even have a passport, I
don't have a passport, no. Ever since I got my certificate of nationality, I've not bothered to make a passport.
I read, in your book, you also talk about your arrest, first house arrest, and then, of course, you were taken to Yehrewada prison. I mean, did the arrest come as a total shock to you?
Actually, yes. See, in a theoretical way, I mean, ever since I've been in the trade union movement, we've seen all this. We do chakka jam, dharna, pradarshan, something, people are arrested, released, all that. But this was the least of the times that I would have expected it. And it was very ironical, because after about 30 years of working in the trade union movement, and then as a lawyer, and having been totally dedicated to my work, I decided to devote some time to my daughter and to my, because she was going to enter college, and I really thought I needed to give her time. So I for the first time, I did a formal job. I became a visiting professor at the NLU, yes. So this coming at that time, and I'm ashamed to say that I did not even know what was Bhima Koregaon. I'm sorry to say that, and not being from Maharashtra, and not being from, and not having been so conversant with Dalit movement and Dalit history, it came just a bolt from the blue.
Many people make friends in high places. I'd like to say that you've made enemies in high places, right? I mean, when I'm reading a book that came across to me, most people are scrambling to make powerful friends. You made very powerful enemies. You've taken on big corporates in Chhattisgarh, Tatas and a lot of others.
Yeah, because that was because actually, not because I took them on personally, but because the interest of the workers, or the interest of the villagers whose lands were being acquired, or the interest of the Adivasis whose forests were being, cut. I mean, willy-nilly I was against the corporates. I had nothing personal against anybody. But willy-nilly, because, they formed the two poles. And I had already decided when I became a lawyer first for the workers, that I'd also try and be a lawyer for all marginalized and deprived communities. And I also realized that, there are many very well-intentioned laws which come about, like the Manrega, like the Forest Rights Act, like the labor laws, but actually they're very poorly implemented. So when you start trying to implement them, there's a backlash. So we set up a small, organization called Janhit, which was a group of lawyers, which was trying to give group legal aid to such groups which are struggling to get their rights.
Yes, and you did your law degree later in life, right? You had a math degree from IIT Kanpur.
Exactly. I did I became a lawyer at the age of 40.
Okay.
And in fact, that was the period when I also adopted my little daughter.
And of course, in prison, you were known as vakeel aunty.
Yeah.
Helping people. So interestingly, you say, you spoke about your mother being a big influence in your life. And in your book, you've written that she was an atheist. Are you also an atheist, may I ask?
I think so. People often ask me, do you believe in God? I say, not in God, but in goodness I do. And in the goodness of humanity, I have deep and unflinching faith.
Well, what I wanted to ask is, did prison make you a believer? Because a lot of people, I'm sure, turn to praying when they're in prison, right? Praying to get out, praying to a higher power. Did you pray? Did it make you a believer in any way?
Not really. No, I think I was too far gone for that. But I could see people all around me praying. All around me praying. But I also think, unfortunately, for a helpless person, there is very little else that you can do.
Just pray.
Yeah. I found people there remarkably secular in their prayers. They pray to all gods. वहाँ हिंदू औरतें भी रोजा रखती हैं. Everybody prays at Christmas time to Yesu. You pray to all gods and you say, some God, please take me out of here. So, but unfortunately, the gods are also very secular. Nobody takes them out unless there's a bail application. So, yeah.
So you think in some ways religious divide gets smoothened over in prison, or is there greater religious divide?
No, I think it gets smoothened over, at least if you let people be. Like in a women's jail, I found that people are very tolerant of each other. Okay. And of course, there are a lot of fights because, you are just, next to each other and there are lines for everything. Every line there's a fight, and for every inch of space, people are fighting. So there's a lot of fights. But also, you can't survive in a jail without friendships. And those friendships are made with the most unlikely people because you're thrown together with people you never knew.
So did you, other than Dr. Shoma Sen, did you make any unlikely friendship?
Oh, yes. Well, many unlikely friendships. But one friend I would like to mention in the Baikala jail, who was a mentally challenged beggar woman who was implicated in the murder of her husband. She used to sleep on the skywalk, Bandra skywalk. And it was obviously a ridiculous case in which she was implicated. And she was not even mentally in the right frame of mind, because she used to keep telling me, oh, my husband is alive. I know, I've seen him. And see, they've brought him over here. I used to say, this is a women's jail. A man cannot be brought in here. So, she was that far gone. Okay. So obviously she was not a murderess,
Yes.
And she initially she used to be sitting there crying, weeping, and then also she had a sort of persecution complex. So she would feel anybody who's laughing is laughing at her. So she would start a torrent of abuse, and then everybody would beat her. So I actually started by being her protector. Don't do this. And after some time, she attached herself to me. Like Mary had a little lamb. So Ammi, so there was Ammi. So then Ammi had to go and make sure that her 8-year-old daughter had been sent to a sanstha. So will she be able to talk to her on the video call? And then she got psychiatric medicines, and then fortunately my lawyers also helped to get her bail.
They did?
And she got out before I did, and the day I got bail, everybody said, "Ye to unki dua lag gayi hai aapko."
I wanted to ask, how does caste play out in jail, caste and class? You wrote about many upper caste, quite a few actually, upper caste Brahmin women. One of them who you said initially might not have even taken food from a lower caste person, but then you're so helpless, you just do anything and everything. And then you spoke about another woman who actually was swabbing and sweeping to earn a little, money for food from the canteen and things like that, and then started crochet work. So how do caste divides play out in prison?
See, actually, the one place where it's very, very obvious is in the sanitation work.
Okay.
Now, earlier that sanitation work was really literally manual scavenging, because in fact those people in the Yerwada jail used to be called kundewali. Generally, the people who can you call it opting? Who go for that work or who are selected for that work are the able-bodied women among the, SC or even OBC, DNT communities. And it's very clear that is there. And the other group against whom the caste discrimination was particularly outspoken was against the Pardhi community. Now the Pardhis are denotified tribes, so they were once counted among the criminal tribes, and then the Criminal Tribes Act was repealed, and in the same breath the Habitual Offenders Act was brought, which is actually for the same people. And even in the police manuals, they say that if there is an unsolved crime somewhere, then they are the easiest suspects.
Okay.
So people are just rounded up, and on the basis of no evidence at all, sometimes they're thrown in jail. And the way these people are treated now, at least when we went in, first of all, Yerwada and Baikala are relatively more better off jails, more progressive jails, and after a very horrendous incident of custodial death in Baikala, at least in the women's jails, we see much less use of corporal punishment.
Okay.
But apparently earlier, these kind of people who were brought in were beaten at the start itself. Now, there's still that verbal abuse is there. Those people will appear segregated. They will eat separately. But it's not that there's something to enforce it, but there is a they are looked down upon as a community.
So like an unsaid sort of hierarchy.
Exactly.
So you spoke of some really bizarre stories of inmates, mother-daughter duo who had, out of some vendetta, killed a man in the most gruesome way. What's the most bizarre story you heard?
That I think was a really bizarre story. And what was most bizarre is that they were very well-educated upper caste women, and this man had actually double-crossed both of them. I mean, he was carrying on an affair with both simultaneously.
Mother-daughter.
Yeah, and they just chopped him into little pieces. Apparently, that is the story, and that's the allegation. One thing which I saw very regularly was, for example, the judges have a lot of sympathy with males who might come across their wife in a compromising position with somebody. And if after that they beat or they kill or they shoot or whatever, I mean, usually that is a defense. It's grave and sudden provocation, and it's a defense. A similar thing you would never do with a woman. She would be a fallen person. She would be a, loose character. That patriarchal mindset is very much there. Yeah, so...
So you're saying they see it through a patriarchal lens, largely.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's sad. And legal aid, you said it's dismal, right? And how does one even apply for legal aid?
See, legal aid basically, actually there are many places where you're asked about it. Like even when you enter the jail, it's supposed to be recorded. Do you have a lawyer? If not, then the jail will try to organize it for you. There are supposed to be people from the legal aid services who come to the jail and who will try to find out who needs. They'll make lists of people who don't have lawyers. But somehow it still doesn't work. And that is partly because the legal aid system has been made unworkable by paying the legal aid lawyers so poorly that nobody can survive on being a legal aid lawyer. They might get appointed, but then they will start fleecing your family. And they say, you get me this much, otherwise I won't argue your bail application and so on. I'm happy that some changes are being brought about in that system.
Okay. Like what?
Yeah. So recently, the at the time when Justice U.U. Lalit was the Chief Justice of India, they started this system of legal aid defense council system in certain districts, where you actually have a legal aid office, and even youngsters who are freshly who are the most enthusiastic and energetic at that time, would be paid a reasonable sum of money for doing legal aid cases, around 40,000 rupees or so on, and they would be supervised by more experienced criminal lawyers.
Right.
But they're only supposed to do legal aid work, not private work. But at least it's sustainable.
Yes.
Because you need a legal aid lawyer who is accountable to the prisoner, not to the legal aid services. Needs to be accountable to the prisoner. So you have to go and meet them, you have to hear their story, you have to compare what you read in the charge sheet with what her story is. Those who are there, I feel that they are accountable to the legal aid services because that's what's paying them. While I was in jail, I wrote a letter with all these suggestions, I don't know whether it ever reached anywhere.
You wrote about a woman booked under POSCO. Actually, a couple of women booked under POSCO, the Protection of Children and from Sexual Offences Act. And you made an interesting comment. You said, even as a feminist lawyer, you are forced to look critically at rape laws.
Yeah, because you see, the thing is, you see, both rape law and, for example, dowry death, and now all this was very important for the women's movement to have asserted this, because things which happen within four corners, in the four walls of a home, don't ever come out in a court. And so that thing about presumption of torture, presumption of harassment, that was very important, because otherwise all these people would have gone scot-free. There would have been no proof. There never is proof. Similarly with rape, I mean, rape is never done publicly. There will never going to be any witnesses.
Yes.
But it is not as if, now the tragedy is that when we hear of its misuse, then immediately there's a clamor for doing away with these laws. That is not the solution.
No.
But obviously, we need to go beyond the surface. So it is true that these kind of things can be misused. I mean, look how a sexual harassment charge was misused against Julian Assange. We need to think about what to do about these things.
Yes. You can't do away with the laws, obviously.
But and we shouldn't. I mean, after all, everything is abused. Corruption laws are also abused.
Yeah.
Murder laws are also, every law is abused.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one doesn't do away with laws for that, but one has to think beyond. One has to think beyond. There shouldn't be knee-jerk reactions. Like, for example, a very terrible knee-jerk reaction has happened after the Nirbhaya case, when people started saying, oh, what is all this juvenile law? We should do away with it. If a juvenile commits a heinous crime, then it's still a heinous crime. You don't understand what the whole premise of juvenile justice is. That person is not yet capable of understanding the consequences. If they have gone astray, then we are all responsible, actually.
So no knee-jerk reactions. But in Nirbhaya's case, of course, was gruesome, right? Do you favor the death penalty for gruesome crimes like that?
See, I don't favor the death penalty at all. And the reason for that being that our criminal justice system is still so fallible, that you will rarely find a powerful or wealthy person getting a death sentence. I mean, how often have we found a powerful and wealthy person getting a death sentence? The people on death row are usually people of underprivileged backgrounds, of poor economic backgrounds, and many people who have not had a proper defense.
Okay.
So, and besides, we are not a society which goes for retribution. We are a society which goes for reformation.
Okay.
In many ways, a life sentence is even worse. I mean, you have to
stick it out.
You have to stick it out. But at least you are saying, okay, this is a human being, and maybe this human being will realize or will reform. That option is at least there. Tomorrow, and this has happened in the US many times, that after the case is over and a person has been executed, subsequently, like there was never DNA evidence. Now DNA evidence has come to show that person was innocent. Now, what do you do about that? Can you change it?
No, you can't.
You can't. And in a country like this, where there are too many things loaded against a poor or a person of underprivileged background who might never get a proper fair defense, can we play God and sentence a person to death? I think not. You should see the cases. Somebody's shirt has been stolen from a shop, and that tailor does not even recognize anybody. The entire family has been picked up. They are acquitted after 11 years. Okay,
11 years.
11. They might not have been in jail the entire period. They might have got bail.
Okay.
But I'm saying acquitted after 11 years. Now, what was it? But that person has to go there to the court every time. Has to pay a lawyer. Has to, kya hai? What is this? And if you're going to have summary justice like this, ki fatafat karo or khatam karo.
Yeah. So it's a system where the poor don't stand a chance, basically.
Yes,
no proper representation.
Exactly.
No legal aid. And the poor really absolutely don't stand a chance. And that
Yeah.
Well, I hope we'll see some positive changes.
We need to.
We need to. Going on to another big issue. Getting the most basic things in prison is a Herculean task, right? You're talking about getting an extra blanket or getting a plastic chair or a commode chair.
I would say Yerwada and Baikala are still much better than many jails I visited in Odisha, even in Chhatisgarh, as an advocate or as a member of the legal aid committee. I had visited many jails. I mean, I'd been to jails where they were still not giving sanitary napkins. Women were still using, those stone saris and all that. That situation has improved.
Okay.
That situation has much improved. The basics are there. But then you see, for example, I mean, Yerwada, at least there were fields next door, you would get vegetables and all that. But Baikala, for example, during the COVID, I mean, after some time, sabzi ke liye to dubki lagani padti thi, but there's no sabzi because it's COVID time. I mean, how do you expect the jail to? So, this whole thing of giving people a reasonable food, reasonable quantity of food, reasonable quality of food, clean. There would be no place in the rainy season to dry your clothes. I mean, every second person has serious fungal infection because clothes don't dry.
But you did manage to get that extra blanket or whatever.
Yeah, fortunately we were above 60 years of age, so we got a blanket. Yeah.
Oh my God. So what do you think was the hardest thing to adjust to in prison, and what are the things you'll never take for granted after coming out?
Well, the freedom to meet your friends and talk to them, and the freedom to have good food.
And you said there are a lot of factions, right? And you said initially when you went, the veterans sized you up and said, okay, this is a naive middle-class woman. Did you finally belong to any faction in the end of it, or you just kept independent?
Yeah. No, actually, fortunately, once I became vakeel aunty, then all factions liked me.
Okay.
Every faction needs a vakeel. Every prisoner needs a vakeel.
Yeah, absolutely. And about Mulaqat, I mean, and your daughter, she's young, must have been very traumatizing for her. I know you've dedicated your book to her.
Yeah.
How often could you meet her?
Well, she was living very far away. She was living in Delhi, and under the case, under the act in which I was, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, you were only allowed. Everybody is allowed visitors once a week, but we are only allowed blood relatives and lawyers. So I could only meet her or my lawyer. So she couldn't make the trip more than once in 3 months. It was very painful for her. I mean, something which she thought was very natural. I mean, in the court, for example, sometimes they wouldn't let you talk to each other. They wouldn't let her hug me, or they wouldn't, letters would take such an awful long time. But yeah, she struggled through it, and she managed, and she completed her BA. In the period when I was in jail, I really...
She's a brave woman, brave girl like you.
Hats off to her, yeah.
Do you think you'll ever enter politics?
Politics electorally, today the electoral arena is one where you can't enter unless you have lakhs and crores of rupees. I mean, even to become a simple sarpanch or to become a simple corporator, you need that. And I'm sure the agencies who have looked into all my bank accounts, my one and only bank account, are quite clear that I don't have the wherewithal to do that. So electoral politics is out, but well, I think I'm doing politics in my own way.
Yes, I think you are too. Lastly, can you give us mantras for strength and resilience?
One thing I can say, all of us feel very burdened by so many problems, so many troubles. There are only two ways of getting unburdened. One way is to share those burdens. The other way is to notice that there are people who are even more burdened than you are.
Okay.
And I think I chose that path.
Right.
And that is what gives me strength. That yes, I've been through things, but I'm still, as I said, even in that jail, I was still a very privileged person. And there's a lot I need to do before I level that playing field. There's a lot I owe to this country and to its people before I level this playing field.
A lot you owe to this country and its people, and you will continue to work towards that.
I will.
Tirelessly and bravely, you continue to work.
But it's something that I'm gaining from. I think it gives me strength. It gives me a lot of hope.
Wow, amazing message. Thank you, Sudhaji. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And
Thank you,
I really
thank you.
recommend everyone to read this book from Phansi Yard. And it's quite an amazing book, really very riveting. And that was a fantastic conversation with someone who is extremely brave. Keep watching Buzz by the Bay for more such inspiring conversations.